Leveling in Diablo IV Season 11 feels like a different beast in many very good ways. The annoying Renown grind? Well, that is quite simply gone. Those permanent bonuses rolled straight into the new season rank system that replaces Season Journey. They are now seasonal, but they are still account-wide and earned through normal play. No more separate parallel grind system. Earning the skill and Paragon points along the journey actually feels really good. Combat feels slower, more tactical, and honestly, way more fun. If you've ever thought that leveling in Diablo IV was boring, this season might just change your mind. The progression just felt really good and fast. So just to make sure, because I've heard a lot of confusion about this, I want to be extra clear. The Renown system in the seasonal realm no longer exists full stop. Instead, we've got season ranks, which are kind of like a merger of the old Renown and Season Journey systems together. As you go through the season, you progress through the ranks to unlock your power rewards like skill points and Paragon points, just like before, but now they're combined into the Season Journey, which is now called ranks. It's cleaner, it's faster, and earning the points actually feels like an achievement instead of a checklist chore. So no more separate systems. The gameplay early on does feel a little bit slower. You have to think about positioning, about cooldowns, about resource management. But for me, although it felt slightly weaker, it also felt much more interesting and engaging. Enemies hit you harder, the things that you do matter, the combat flow just feels overall better. If you're like me and you've been in the habit of starting in hard or expert or even penitent just to give yourself a challenge, you may find that that is no longer needed. The opening of the leveling experience will be familiar. You're going to grab the seasonal quest and complete the first step to get the reputation opened, and then you're going to head straight to Helltide, which is considerably different as Helltide is now the domain of Durian. Overall, leveling from 1 to 60 feels slower in each individual combat encounter as the combat pacing is slightly slowed down, but interestingly enough, the actual time from 1 to 60 felt way faster. Over the last several seasons, there has been a consistent theme of leveling getting better and better with each one, and this season certainly continues that trend. Overall, the leveling experience in the Season 11 PTR just felt really, really good. Capstone challenges are back in Diablo IV Season 11, but this time they're not so much the barriers that they were in the early game as much as milestones that kind of give you a sense of where you are in your build and your journey. Not to mention, it feels really good to earn it. Each capstone sort of feels like a moment where you prove that you're ready to go to the next step. One really nice thing about them is that they do have a recommended level, so you're not just aimlessly wondering when you should advance from normal to hard or hard to expert or expert to penitent. You can kind of get a good sense by how you do in the capstones, and you have a general idea of what level you should take them on. Another great thing about capstones is that they are not level locked, and by that I mean you don't have to be a specific level to do them. This really puts some choice in your hands. If you've got a build that you feel is really strong and you're feeling good about it, you can take on the level 30 capstone at level 20 or 25. If you clear it, great, you're well on your way to having a really strong build. If not, you can always take a step back, level up a little more, and then hit it again a little bit closer to the level. On the flip side, if you're struggling with your build and you're having difficulty clearing content, you can always just over level a little bit and, hit that 30 capstone at 35 or even 40. Also, it doesn't necessarily have to be based on build power. It can just be based on your preference. If you like to just blast and destroy everything really quickly, hit them all over leveled. If you like to prove that you've got skills and a strong build, then hit them all early. Either way, it adds an excellent element of player choice to the game that I'm really excited about. Another reason I'm really excited about having capstone challenges back in the game is because of their potential to support community-driven events. In the early game, when we had Capstones, there was a budding community starting to form around speedruns for Diablo IV. Now, if you're not familiar with Diablo 2, one of the things that really exploded Diablo 2's popularity was speedrunning. In the early days of Diablo 4 speedrunning, you would go until you completed a certain capstone, and there was different tiers of speedrun depending on which one you finished. So now we have potential to bring that back into the game, and it's a competitive area that doesn't necessarily involve having the uber gear for the end game of the pit and the tower. Again, community-driven speedrun events, the potential from having capstones back in is really big, and I, for one, am very excited to see what we can do with this. So, in summary, I think the capstones are great. I think they're really well implemented. They've got some interesting mechanics, and I think they're just generally going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to them being in the game. Season 11 has seen expansion and enhancement of the boss ladder. Although they no longer call it a boss ladder, it's starting to look more and more like one. There are some outliers who help to flesh out the overall boss experience who don't fit neatly in the emerging ladder, like Bartuk, Urivar, Astaroth, and the Harbinger of Hatred. But for now, we'll focus on the not ladder bosses. The new system expands on their efforts to free us from boss jail. In Season 9, and basically every season prior to that, we spent tons of time grinding the same lair bosses over and over and over again, hoping for a drop. Over the last few seasons, they've started to make those drops more available in other locations, reducing the reliance on farming the same bosses endlessly. The addition of Belial to the game expanded on our ability to get these drops from more places than just the same old bosses. In Season 11, they're ramping it up even further. The return of Azmodan to Sanctuary now provides us another boss on the top tier. Whether he sits beside Belial or on a tier above is yet to be seen. We'll have to wait for the season to go live to know for sure. How does the saying go? The more things change, the more they stay the same? Well, that's somewhat the case here, as there are still familiar pieces of the early boss ladder in place, with open world content and dungeons providing material to unlock loot from lower tier bosses, like Varshan, Grigori, Zir, and the Beast in the Ice, who in turn provide the materials for the next tier of bosses, Duriel and Andariel. The addition of Belial added a new element with Ambush Belial, who has a chance to spawn after defeating any of the earlier ladder bosses, and provides the material for the lair version of Belial, which was, at the time of his addition, the pinnacle fight of the boss ladder. Season 11 adds Azmodan as a summonable top-tier open-world ladder boss, and also as a world boss, with materials provided by the other invading lesser evils, both in their familiar haunts as well as new locations, including Helltide for Duriel, Undercity for Andariel, and the Pit for Belial. The materials gathered from these fights all feed up to what seems likely to be the new loot reward pinnacle, in the chests that you can open with them after defeating the summonable open-world version of Azmodan. These fights can all also drop heavenly sigils, used at the forge to sanctify your gear. While they can drop at any of these encounters, the highest chance and quantity comes from Azmodan in either of his locations, and they are better in higher torment tiers. In conclusion, the boss system in the game is growing, and I think in a good way. It's providing more encounter diversity, more loot, more different experiences to get that loot, and overall a less boring grind. Of course, it's an ARPG. There will be grind. There will always be grind. But it seems like they're doing what they can to make that grind feel better, and to me, that is a good thing. The Season 11 PTR crafting changes are one of the most exciting and at the same time most controversial topics to come out of the PTR. I have seen and heard reactions ranging from, "Oh my god, this is amazing, I can't wait to use it," to, "What the hell is wrong with Blizzard and why don't they understand that we hate this stuff?" about the exact same feature. So I'm going to offer my take. I'm going to break it down into 3-stage crafting process of customizing, enhancing, and the Gamba. In the realm of customization, we have tempering and enchanting. Tempering has gone through a major rework, essentially removing bricking completely. They have given us a more deterministic ability to select the stat that we want. The value roll is still RNG. However, they have removed the use limit on temper reset scrolls and tempered that with giving less rerolls per scroll. The big downside to this change is that we can only apply one temper to each item. So while you're getting that total deterministic experience on your one temper, you're also losing a second temper. Now, the power that was in that second temper has essentially been shifted back to the basic stats on the gear by going back to 4 affixes instead of 3. This can make it a little more difficult to find ideal drops, but the other systems that we're going to talk about can have an impact on this. I think overall effect of this system will certainly be a plus, although it will definitely take some getting used to. While the enchanting system hasn't changed, it will now be more critical than ever for refining the stats of dropped ROG items. Achieving items with 4 effective stats is going to be exponentially harder, and enchanting is going to greatly increase your odds of being able to do this. Under the category of enhancement, we currently have Masterworking. Masterworking has gone through perhaps an even more significant and impactful change than tempering. Gone are the days of triple crits on essential stats for the build. This has very clear downsides, in that you now need to find some stats across multiple different items to even begin to approach the level that you were able to reach in the past. Gone are the builds that relied on stacking triple crits of one stat on multiple items because you simply cannot reach the level required to drive them. But there are also upsides. You are going to be able to essentially deterministically upgrade a stat on each item to a greater affix. The system is RNG, but with only a few possible outcomes, the odds are high of getting what you want. And this only increases with higher GA items, as there are less non-GA that it could possibly land on. On top of this, you are able to continue to re-roll it at the cost of 1 Neath Iron and some gold until you get the GA boost where you want it. This can be extremely useful for finding an item that is lacking an important stat, but has good rolls of other needed stats. Enchanting off the least useful stat with the missing stat, and rolling the GA onto that new stat. Think items missing primary base stat, which is one of the easiest possible things to get with enchanting. I've seen a lot of criticism about the 20 tiers of upgrading and the potential that you might have to click 20 times to get that 20th tier, but I would wager that virtually no one has spent less than 20 clicks to masterwork an item more than a handful of times in previous seasons, and the average clicks per item was probably many times that. So honestly, I kind of see this as a non-issue. And now for the one that everyone has been waiting for, the big Gamba, Sanctification. The new Sanctification system is perhaps the most powerful and most controversial of all the changes coming to Diablo IV crafting in Season 11. While most people are celebrating the removal of bricking from the tempering system, it feels kind of bad at the initial look to see bricking re-injected in the crafting system at the highest stakes possible. And indeed, my initial reaction to this system was one of sheer panic and outrage. How could you possibly move the bricking instead of removing bricking? But after I dug into the system, I've come away with a slightly different take. Yes, it is true that risking your god tier items is likely ill-advised, especially if you don't already have a backup item in place. However, in the PTR, I was able to use this system successfully and to great effect to upgrade gear that would normally have been instantly salvaged as junk. What I'm talking about here is 1 or 2 GA items that were not better than what I already had. Now, 1 GA items are extremely common, and 2 GA are not super rare. By using enchanting, tempering, masterworking, and finally sanctification on these essentially common items, you can actually turn them into god tier items. And even if sanctification produces a bad result, what have you really lost? A handful of gold and mats, and an item you would have likely sold or salvaged? While the risk involved with sanctifying very rare and powerful items like mythic uniques is extremely high, and I would not advise most players to be using the system at all for such items unless you already have an item just as good or better as a backup, the potential here to transform what would have previously been considered junk into very good items is real. You could potentially get a 1 or 2 GA item, run it through all of these systems, and at the end have a 2 to 3 GA or even 4 GA item, or potentially have a 6th affix or a 2nd aspect. I believe that once this is live and people get their heads around how to use this system effectively, it will become a much loved addition to the crafting systems in the game. So, this brings us to Endgame. Top tier endgame activities to be precise. The pit right now feels really bad. I understand that we're at a low point in the power creep cycle, and that along with major system changes, Season 11 introduces a major reset to player power, essentially putting everyone back to baseline. And that's necessarily going to make the hardest content that much tougher. The current tuning might be a little too aggressive, because only a few builds can actually do well in top tier content. The other thing I will say about the pit is for the developers on the Diablo team. This would be a look into the camera moment if I had a camera. Team, I have to ask. Shades. Why with the shades? We told you we hated the shades. You took the shades out of the bosses. We were happy. You were happy that we were happy. And now they're everywhere. Okay, back to our review. The shades, combined with the new elite modifiers and the minions inheriting affixes, makes combat feel chaotic and cluttered. There's too many swords and saw blades and Belial shades and snake shades and ground explosions and poison bubbles and red circles. It just feels frenzied, stressful, unintentional, and lacking any tactical flow. Now, on top of all of this, the rewards feel paltry. No more obols and barely any XP. What gives? Simply put, the pit does not feel like the rest of the game in Season 11. I didn't even attempt the tower because none of the builds I was working with felt strong enough for me to feel like I actually wanted to really push them and see how far they could go, because they were just weak. Instead, I chose to focus my time on leveling multiple characters, testing crafting systems, trying out virtually every skill and build you can on a Sorc. Like I said, I understand that we're in a power creep reset moment, and that it is intentional, and understandably needed after Season 10. But there's an achievement in the rank system for Pit 75 which feels unrealistic for most builds. Out of all the sorcerer builds I tested, there were only two I think could probably do it for most players, and that's on PTR. I was Paragon 300, level 100 glyphs, running 3 and 4 GA on every slot, running builds with 2 or 3 mythic uniques, builds that have been very high performers over previous seasons. It just feels like the power reset overshot what was needed, just a little bit, and I really hope that changes before the season goes live. Overall, I'm feeling excited about Season 11. In spite of my frustration with the pit and the endgame, everything else feels to me like it's going in a good direction. I understand a lot of people are freaked out, a lot of people are complaining, but from what I can see, it really looks to me like they're actually doing what they said in the campfires and the sit-downs. That they're making systemic changes that are removing blocks that prior to Season 11 were preventing them from doing things that they would like to do with the game, and that we would probably like them to do with the game. Sometimes, when you have to do a systemic overhaul like this, it's a bumpy ride. I'm fully prepared for that ride to be bumpy, and I'm optimistic about the future of Diablo IV. Well, that's going to do it for this review, but I'm curious to know, what do you think? What are your least and most favorite moments from the PTR? What systems do you feel happy about or concerned about? Let us know in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please do like, subscribe if you're interested in future content from me. I hope to catch you all in Season 11.